And we say, Ashe. Now, what we want to do is we want to offer the blessings. We want to offer this portal libation to all our ancestors, your relatives, your grandmothers, your uncles, your fathers, all those who have had a major impact in your life. And we say, Ashe. Would you start by naming the ancestors, your relatives that's in your life? Ashe. Now, we want to offer these blessings to those who are freedom fighters, those who came before us in this struggle, those who made these events happen, those who stood at the forefront of our struggle, our liberation, our revolution. This revolution would take place. We need to call forth those ancestors of these great, great freedom fighters, and we say, give names to those freedom fighters, those who Now we want to pour this blessing to those who are unknown, those who are yet to have been born, and those who await our justice. And we say, I say, Bingo libation is now finished. Dupwe, which means thank you, peace, and blessing.
Mr. Kiana.
Everybody put your right fist in the air. I pledge allegiance to my people.
I pledge allegiance to my people.
The African race.
The African race.
Founders of civilization.
Founders of civilization.
I pledge to study and discipline myself.
I pledge to study and discipline myself.
Get it right. Get it together.
I'm sorry, you want to hold on?
Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to my people.
I pledge allegiance to my people.
The African race.
The African race.
The original man and woman of the earth.
The original man and woman of the earth.
The founders of civilization.
And the founders of civilization.
I pledge to continue the struggle.
I pledge to continue the struggle.
Which will help to bring.
Which will help to bring.
My beloved brothers and sisters.
My beloved brothers and sisters.
To total freedom.
To total freedom.
I pledge to study and discipline myself.
I pledge to study and discipline myself.
Mentally.
Mentally.
Spiritually.
Spiritually.
And physically.
And physically.
Because my people need.
Because our people need.
Strong and intelligent warriors.
Strong and intelligent warriors.
I pledge to live my life standing tall.
I pledge to live my life standing tall.
For a person on his or her knees.
For a person on his or her knees.
Not respected.
It's not respected.
And if I am challenged.
And if I am challenged.
I must say.
I must say.
That I will endure.
That I will endure.
Not surrender, I'm saying.
Not surrender.
My dignity.
My dignity.
Nor my position.
Nor my position.
But instead.
I
will endure.
I will endure.
Until the final victory is won.
Until the final victory is won. Let's clap it up for the sisters.
That takes a lot of guts, a lot of courage to get up here in front of 100 people to do that on spur of the moment. So that's a young sister still in high school who's coming up here saying something positive, reciting something positive. So we gotta clap it up for that sister one more time for the self-determination to get up here and recite the African pledge. We would like to thank everyone for coming out to this evening's event. Y'all ready to hear Brother Tony Browder? Let's clap it up. Our dear scholar. If you never heard Tony Browder before, I'm telling you right now, get your pens and your pads out, because you're going to be getting a lot of information this evening. You have never been on a tour before with Tony Browder. The Egypt on Potomac is what he called it. You've never been on that tour. How many people been on the tour? By show of hands. Everybody who don't have your hands up, you need to sign up for that tour, because after this lecture today, you'll be convinced that, man, you need to see what's going on, for real. It'll change your life, believe me. So then again, that tour is Sunday, October 9th, which is next Sunday. You can sign up out there. We're gonna be raffling off a ticket in a few minutes, so get ready to raffle off the ticket, because there's a lucky person in here today who's gonna be winning a free seat, you know what I'm saying, to get on that tour. So that's a blessing right there. But as we continue on, we gotta give thanks to a sister who's been ill. I must say this. How many people know Sister Nzinga from Just You and Me Talk? So let's clap it up for that sister. Sister been in the community for many years. She's been on the radio before I was born, so I definitely give it to the sister. She's a pioneer of black radio, black conscious radio. The sister had heart surgery, so we want to keep her in our prayers. She's usually here pouring out libation for us, and her spirit is definitely missed, but we know her spirit is also here. That's right. So we want to keep that sister in our prayers. I wish her a full recovery, because that sister is a strong sister. She's inspired me all the time. So we want to keep Sister Nzinga in our prayers. But we got a little treat for y'all. How y'all feel though? How y'all feel? How y'all feel? Come on now. I know y'all not going to sleep on me, are y'all? Come on now. I got a little chant I want to say. I'm going to say how the Africans feel. Y'all know, right? What I'm gonna say? What y'all going to say? The spirit is strong, definitely strong. How the Africans feel? Spirit strong, definitely strong. So Baba, show them how to say it, y'all. How the Africans feel? Spirit strong, definitely strong. That's right, that's right. That's a little energy, a little bit more energy. But we got a special treat for y'all this evening. The sister came in the barbershop yesterday, and we thought it would be fitting for us to put up here on this event, because she had poetry that's out this world. Her poetry is inspirational, motivational, uplifting, all those kind of good words. So let's give a round of applause for our sister, Abiola Valentine.
Greetings, peace and love. Before I get started, you can see me after the program to get my business card with my phone number, and also if you're interested in my CD, I'll have it with me. And also, next Saturday morning, you can check me out on WEAA with none other than Dr. Gossie Hudson. Just saw him out there in the hallway. Dr. Hudson, you still here?
He's still here.
Dr. Hudson. Oh, you still in the hallway? Okay. Brothers and sisters, Marvin Gaye said, what's going on? That's the question that comes to my mind when I see what's going on today with our babies. You know, we are buying our babies. They come home from the hospital in designer clothes. You know what I'm saying? But we're not loving them. We're not nurturing them. We're not giving them the ingredients that they need in order to survive. The clothes ain't gonna do it. We need to put our arms around hold our babies tight. And generation after generation, I'm seeing the mothers cussing at their babies at 2 years old. And this piece I'm going to share with you was born out of a situation I saw. I was in Shoppers. And I saw a little baby, looked like he was about 2 years old, and he was standing there, he was crying. Water was running down, and I could tell by the cry, it wasn't a cry of he couldn't have candy or something he wanted, but it was a cry of discomfort. And Dr. Hudson. Let's give Dr. Hudson a hand. This baby's cry was a cry of need to be touched, and it broke my heart, because the mother stood there and didn't even touch the child. And he kept saying, Mama, Mama. And when I got in my car, I started hearing these words. When I got home, instead of eating dinner, I went right to the computer, and this is what came. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son, the firstborn of the universe, to come back home and rebuild the land of our forefathers. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son, the creator of science, math, medicine, and dentistry, the builder of the Sphinx and pyramids, to come back home and teach and heal the wounded children of our mothers. my son, the artist, the drummer, the dancer, the sculptor, the painter, the poet, to come back home, to uplift your hands, your feet, and your voice, and bring our people to a new horizon of freedom. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She sees you in Shoppers, Giant, Rite Aid, Kmart, and Walmart. 2 years old with tears running from your red eyes and mucus running from your raw nose, crying, Mama, Mama, Mama. As your arms are lifted up to be held and your mama stands stoic still like an oak tree with no expression as if she don't see or hear you. Because she's been hurt so much by the weight of the world, the weight of the world, the weight of the world, carrying the burden and the pain of her mama, her grandmama, and her ancestors. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She watches you as you push your way through that dark birth canal of your 14-year-old mama who is screaming, screaming, screaming for her mama, who told her if she was grown enough to lay with your daddy, then she's grown enough to bear the burden and pain of coming into the world alone. As you push, and she screams and screams, your daddy is sleeping with another girl because he is too scared to face your reality because he is just a 16-year-old boy himself. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She feels the pain when you have to rely on Rockaware, Sean John, Fat Farm, and Timberland to make you think you somebody. Because nobody said they loved you, that you were smart and good looking. Nobody hugged you, ate breakfast with you, ate dinner with you, took you to the library, showed you how to catch a ball, ride a bike, or swim. Because nobody told you that you are special and that you can save the world, save the world, save the world. Our children can save the world. All you heard is you just like your no good daddy. You ain't gonna ever be nothing. Don't you hear it? Every day. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She sees you acting out in school to cover up the fact that you ain't prepared. Because you stayed up late last night on the phone with your girl, didn't do no homework, didn't do no reading, didn't do no research on the computer. Instead, you talked about what you was going to wear tomorrow and looked at the latest Source and Vibe magazine for the hottest eye candy and the cool brothers with their bling bling. You played Grand Theft Auto and Fight for New York and thought it was what you do on a computer. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She feels your anger toward the world when you can't get no job because you ain't got no training. So you sell weed, crack, and heroin to support your high living and get your girl's nails and hair done and buy her the latest Gucci bag and Tiffany's necklace. As your mama brags about the house you bought her and the home you drive around the hood, just styling and fronting, perpetrating being a real man. Because deep down inside you are lost and confused. Mama Africa weeps for you, weeps for you, weeps for you, my son, when you lay on hard metal with no mattress as your prison mate reveals that he's doing time for raping a child. And you curl into a fetal position, turn your face to the wall and cry in fear. Because you know you ain't strong enough to protect yourself if he rapes you. Your deep reality surfaces at midnight when you realize mama can't protect you. The daddy that never trained you suddenly causes a big hole to surface, and you understand that being a man is more than wearing the latest fashion, poking some girl, getting high, and showing off your ride. Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She weeps for you, my son. She sees you as you struggle in your mind and emotions, totally lost, don't know who you are, don't know where you came from or where you're going, realizing that your manhood is not on your back, in your loins or in your walk, lost, confused, don't know where to begin to put the pieces together that never were. Who am I, you ask? Why was I created? Is this all there is? Where did I go wrong? Why didn't somebody love me and teach me? Mama Africa weeps for you, my son. She holds the key to civilization and life. She stands tall and proud, rich in culture, yet barren from being stripped of her gold and diamonds, and most of all, her children that were taken away, never to return, never to return. Go home, my son. Go home. Close your eyes, my son, and go home. Reach deep in the bowels of the earth of your soul and go home. And Mama Africa will teach you about God, about love, about humanity, and about being a man. Thank you.
Let's clap it up for Sister Abiola Valentine. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Inspirational. Thank you, sister. We appreciate that. Once again, we'd like to welcome you to the Soul Robbers Nation. How the Africans feel? Come on, y'all. Y'all losing. The spirit is strong, definitely strong. I know y'all come here to get filled. Y'all are going to get filled. Y'all going to be full. But how the Africans feel? How the Africans feel? That's right. That's right. Right now, we're going to do something a little different. Look to the person to your left and your right. Say, hello, brother. How you doing today? I love you. That's right. This is black love. This is something new we're doing in all our music. We're people of love and the people of unity. We got to know our brothers. Some of us are sitting next to a person, haven't never seen a person. We got to introduce ourselves. Be kind-hearted, kind-spirited. So as we go on, we got a strong sister in the organization who's going to come up here and say a few words. Tony Browder just entered the building. Okay, we bring her up next, but we're going to go into our brother, Anthony Browder's. Okay, we trying to get him on the stage, so we're going to bring up another strong soldier. Let's clap it up for Tony Browder, though. Let's clap it up for our children. Let's clap it up for our brother while he gets set up. So he's going to be doing a little setting up. We're going to continue the program, let him get his things together, get his things in order. But we're going to bring up a strong soldier in a struggle. A strong soldier in a struggle who's been doing a lot of work with the Nation of Islam. He's actually the minister, Minister Carlos Muhammad. He's here doing sound for us. So let's clap it up for the brothers who are doing sound for the Nation of Islam. This brother's going to come and say a few words with us about the historical Meansville movement. So let's give it up for our brother, Carlos Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, I want to thank Brother Jabari and all of the members of the Soul Robbers Nation for just extending an opportunity to say a few words tonight. But I, like you, have come to hear from our brother, our historian, our scholar, because, you know, all of us that talk for a living, we cannot really truly be sincere about what we're saying unless we continue, as Minister Farrakhan said, to study and listen. Study and listen. You cannot be an effective teacher unless you at the same time are a student. And so I just want to give a few words concerning, we 14 days away, the 10th anniversary of the Million Man March. And while we are mobilizing, while many thoughts are traveling throughout the nation concerning why a Millions More movement, I think the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, in fact I know, really is a man that does not need to explain why we must get together right now, because if you just look at the condition of your people wherever you are, you see now that the time has arrived that we can no longer ask anybody, even to a degree demand, because our demands have went on deaf ears, and now it is time for us to take our legacy, our history, and everything of our future into our own hands. Do you all agree? Yeah. Legislation ain't going to do it. It's going to be us doing it. Is that right or wrong? So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it like this. He said, our unity is more powerful than any nuclear bomb. But what is it's going to take, brothers and sisters, is for all of us to finally get to a point where most of us have, where we're willing to drop whatever we think our central view is, whatever we think our little nook and cranny is. We got to get beyond our symbols and the colors, and all of that means nothing if our people continue to die and continue to be oppressed like they are. So most of the leaders have agreed that no one leader has a monopoly on the freedom, justice, and equality for our people. It's going to take us all to get it done. So I just want to thank Brother Jabari. We're 14 days away. We're going to be on the mall October 15th, standing up for ourselves, because it ain't about doing it for nobody but yourself now. It's about us. Is that right? So I want to thank Brother Jabari. Of course, as Brother Sudiata said, I'm here doing sound tonight because when a brother calls and a brother's in need, we got to do our best to answer that call. And we're not too big and we're not too important that we can't cover down and step in and help our brothers and sisters that are in need. So we're here tonight to help, but at the same time learn from our brothers. So I want to thank Brother Jabari and all of the brothers and sisters from Soul Bibles Nation. Let's give them a hand for even quicker soldiers from brother to brother over here, young, strong brothers helping our young children out. Let's give them a round of applause. Brother Sudiata, who's going to take us further into our message tonight. Let's bring Brother Sudiata back with a great round of applause.
Let's clap it up for Minister Carlos Muhammad one more time. We love you, bro. Also, this event would not be possible if it wasn't for the college and the university here at Sojourner Douglas College. So let's also clap it up for Dr. Simmons and his administration for having us here. Thank you, Dr. Simmons, for opening your doors to the Soul Bible Nation and also the black community. We appreciate you and the administration for that. So as we continue the program, we're going to bring up another strong soldier. Y'all can see here in Tubman City in Baltimore, we got a licensed young man. So now we've already bring the chairman up of the Soul Bibles Nation, who's also another young man. This young man, many of y'all know, been doing a lot of work in the community for over 12 years. So let's give a round of applause for Brother Jabari.
Coming for you with the mind state of liberation, coming from a long legacy of battle stars and freedom fighters. I acknowledge my duty to truth and justice as a Soul Bibles Nation representative, and I'm a humble servant of my community. Elders, may I have permission to speak?
Speak. Speak.
Appreciate y'all coming out here tonight. How y'all feeling?
Great.
Nah, let's do it right. How the Africans feel? We're going to get back to that. That was a little weak. Just want to say a couple things. It's 40 days tonight that my Uncle D, my Uncle Daryl, passed away. And he actually helped me plan these events in October right here. He said, man, you got to, because he went on the Tony Browder tour. He said, man, we got to do Tony Browder. Why don't you just do the whole October, just nothing but Tony Browder in that month. So we decided to do, well, first it was going to be, the first trip was going to be in September. And then we was going to do a tour and a lecture here tonight. But, you know, it didn't work out that way. So we just did the whole October, nothing but Tony Browder in October. And of course the Millions More movement that, you know, we have coming up. But Uncle D helped us plan this event here. He's not here with us today, like I said, it's 40 days in his passing. So we want to just clap it up for that strong black man in this transition to the ancestors. Also today, earlier today, we just joined the ancestors. A brother of mine, I may know a brother named Donald, who used to always come out to all our events. My brother-in-law, who passed away, and this brother was very important because this was the brother who gave me my first Ashra Kwesi tape. Anybody who know what Ashra Kwesi is, he's the one that gave me my first tape. Clap it up for Ashra Kwesi. Both of these brothers mean a lot to me, so, you know, I want to definitely give them a shout out in their transition to the ancestors, you know, and then you'll never be forgotten. As a matter of fact, like I said, my Uncle D is the one who said that when we came with the Unified Die thing, the concept and everything, and you'll see even with the music CD, now we got the CD is out now. Conscious Head CD is out, we got them on sale right now. And the whole CD is a dedication to my Uncle D, like I said, who definitely came up with that concept with the Unified Die in general. I just want to go over just one point real quick. You know, why do we need these lectures? And I'm sick and tired of just hearing people running their mouths all the time talking about, yeah, man, I'm tired. All people do is come out there to lectures to be entertained and all this kind of stuff, all this dumb, stupid stuff, man. You know, we got over 2,000 people on our mailing list, and they've been to a Reality Speaks event here or there. And what happens is most people start feeling like that at the same time. So then who suffers? Soul Vibers Nation suffers. Brother Tony Brown is one of the baddest black men on the planet right now. But we don't honor and support our scholars. Those white folks, man, they living up in them big old houses and cars and stuff. When they get out there and research, these brothers been on this field for years, decades of research and study. So all of us, first I look like, dang, what are we not doing right in the promotion of these events? But then I'm like, everybody got to look at themselves. Because when we hear about Tony Browder coming to town, all of us got the obligation to go and tell as many people as possible and drag them out here to these events. Because you know they're going to love the events when they come out here. Because it's all about changing, having a change in our minds. We got some cat running around, people running around talking about, yeah, man, we don't need to be worried about lectures and stuff like that. We need to have a revolution in our minds, man. You know, they run around talking all this stuff. We don't need to have that, no. We need to create jobs for the youth. Yeah, we need jobs for the youth. But if you gave every black youth a job right now, it wouldn't matter. They still be crazy as hell. You can form any black town, all the black towns you want, they be crazy. They be in there sticking up people in the black town and doing all kinds of crazy things. So we got to have that revolution in our minds. The other day, just to talk about, we went to a rally the other day that we attended. Just while looking, I want to give props to Brother Munir, because he brought out about 12 soldiers. Clap it up for the Brother Munir once more. Also, before I forget, my big brother Carlos, like you said, who came out here, man, in his busy schedule, getting ready for the Millions More movement to do sound for us. We really appreciate that. So give him another round of applause and black hands. We went out to the streets the other day, and we went out to the streets. Some brothers from the Bloods called us. They said, man, these police been rolling up on us, man. They've been beating us up, blindfolding us, taking us to other parts of the city and all that. Called us up. It was about 7 o'clock, and we went down there. I think we got there about 8 o'clock when they was doing it. We went down there, first of all, wasn't nobody out there for a rally. He called me, he wasn't there. So we seen a couple other people. We said, well, look, we'll be back next week and we'll do something, bring a few members or whatever. Got back down there, they wasn't even there themselves, you know what I'm saying? The people who got locked up and beat down by the police, they wasn't even there to stand up for themselves. So our thing is, man, look, if we're gonna come out to the community, we're gonna fight for you, it's gonna be a border. You know what I mean? If we coming out there, we putting our bodies out there, we putting our lives on the line, you gonna make a commitment. You gonna start trying to change some of the things that you're doing in the community. Because just like the cracker got zero tolerance, out there, the cracker got zero tolerance on us, right? Even for all of us that's in here right now, they got zero tolerance, right? So we got zero tolerance on each other. Even those Bloods and stuff, man. Oh, we all big and bad when it comes to ourselves, you know what I mean? Man, I'm gonna roll up on them niggas, yo, I'm kicking down the door, I'm killing this motherfucker, I don't even care, man. Roll up on the block, shooting at each other. Even in the conscious community, all over, I got people that came out to lectures before, and one little thing happened, zero tolerance. Oh hell, I ain't going no more Reality Speaks events, I'm boycotting, and I'm gonna tell other people not to come. It's a sister that actually said that to me before. You know, and we zero tolerance, but when it comes time for us to be zero tolerance towards the people we need to be zero tolerance towards, we ain't got no heart. You know what I mean? We ain't got no stand up. So we saying, this is what we saying. Them boys, they jumping out, they doing all kinds of things in the black community out of self-defense and out of God's law. If we stand up in the community, there's nothing wrong with that. We got the right to stand up. If they doing wrong, we can stand up and defend ourselves in the community. They've been rotting ever since we've been here on this large plantation. They've been rotting. So we got to start standing up in the community. And for all of y'all, everybody that's out here right now that's not involved in the organization, it's time to be organized. Get involved in the organization. Soul Vibers Nation is here. The Nation of Islam is here. Brother Munir and his group is here. There's a whole bunch of other groups that's here. Get with somebody. If you're not involved in the organization, put your funds up. And if you're tired of lectures, you don't want to come to certain lectures, sponsor people in the community. Then we can have the community come for free. You put up, you know what I mean? Say, look, I'm going to get $50 towards a lecture. And we can bring in 5 people so that we can help brothers like Tony Browder fund the research that he's doing, because these brothers are going broke because people not supporting them the way that they're supposed to. So, again, let's clap it up for Brother Tony Browder. And I'm talking while he's getting this thing straight. But how many people here are in organizations right now? Okay, so those people who didn't raise your hands, our problem is, like Marcus Garvey said, now it's time for black people to arm ourselves with organization. Organization, even in the COINTELPRO book, I was reading the COINTELPRO book the other day. That means counterintelligence program that the FBI started. That's how they broke up the Black Panther Party and other organizations. They said the number one thing is to stop the coalition of black people coming together, because in unity there is strength. They know that. That's why our slogan is unify or die. If we don't come together, it's over for us. All of us, we gotta come together. We gotta stop the zero tolerance that we have towards each other. Y'all agree? Yeah. If we make a mistake at Reality Speaks or Soul Violence Nation, don't just stop coming to the lectures and stuff. We don't mean to do it. A lot of times it's happening because we running around trying to pay the BG&E, the phone. We just don't have the proper resources. But I'm telling you, if we get the proper resources, we will be out here fighting these crackers and injustice tooth and nail. Y'all want to see work continue to be done, support the Soul Violence Nation, support many of these organizations, not just the Soul Violence Nation, anybody that's organized and trying to help black people, help them, man. Don't just sit on the sideline. The problem is, it's not enough of us getting involved at any given time. That's the problem. We sit back, a lot of us cheerleaders. Yeah, what y'all doing, man? You know what I mean? Sit on the side, you know what I mean? Nah, man, I said just like a boxer or whatever, you know what I'm saying? We in the ring, we fight. All the other people that's sitting on the side or outside of the ring, they just sitting back. Yeah, man, you should have jabbed a little bit more, whatever like that. Nah, man, I don't respect that, you know what I'm saying? Coming from people if you ain't doing nothing in the community. So we gotta get organized. All right? Okay, brothers and sisters, like I said before, Brother Tony Browder is one of the baddest black men on this planet. We got to give him his due props. Look, we got the tour going next Sunday. We got tickets here on sale. The tickets are $40. For y'all tonight, they $35. We got to fill this bus up so that we can support Soul Violence Nation, so that we can support Tony Browder. All right? And if you can't go and if you got the money, then sponsor somebody so we can bring somebody, because some of those bloods who need to get this information, they will be inspired when they go on this tour. So let's clap it up. Give a long round of applause to Brother Tony Browder.
Wonderful. I want to make sure everybody can see. Can you see the image on the wall behind me?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. What I'm going to be doing is sharing with you some PowerPoint images along with my presentation, my discussion this evening on the film National Treasure. Just for my own personal benefit, so I can get a feel for how I want to go with this presentation. How many of you all have seen the film? Okay, over half. Good, good, good. For those that haven't seen the film, then, you know, we're not going to be spoiling anything for you. We'll just be giving you some additional insight so that when you do have the opportunity to see the film, you can look for these historical and subtle things that I'm going to be bringing to your attention in the film itself. So, give me 1 minute. Let me get all of my things together here, and we can get started. How are you all doing? Fine. All right, great. Very wonderful. Yeah, I do apologize for being a little late today. I gotten all the way here to the parking lot and then realized that I had left my computer in my driveway. But so I had to run home and get that. But I apologize for being a little late in the program getting started. It wasn't due to the brothers, it was due to me. So thank you all for being patient, and we're going to jump into the presentation and make the most of this evening. Now, the film, National Treasure, was released about a year ago. And when I first saw the previews of the film on television, of course, it interested me when I saw the symbols of the Great Seal. Yeah. And I realized that someone was making a film talking about the role of Masonry and the Founding Fathers, which is a subject matter that has been near and dear to my heart for the last 20-some-odd years. And I was interested just in seeing how the film, how the story was going to be presented. And when I went to see the film, I found that, generally speaking, audiences responded well to the film. Now, it was an all-right movie. It was a B movie. But what I noticed when I was in the theater watching the film, that there were a lot of Europeans in the audience who really got into the film. And they got into the film for a couple of reasons. One, because it was a feel-good movie. Yeah. Two, because it was suitable for the family, for the entire family. There was no profanity. There was no gratuitous violence or sex. So it was a film that, you know, father could take his children and feel comfortable with what they were going to see. But it was also was a film that lifted up their history for them and gave them something to be proud of. I actually heard this father talking to his son throughout the film and just reinforcing some of the historical issues that were raised in the film about Benjamin Banneker, about Thomas Jefferson. So he was using the film as a history lesson for his son. And I saw that, and it made me a little envious because it's not very often that there are films made about us that we can refer to as good history lessons, not just for ourselves, but for our children. All too often, many of the films that feature us are films that show us acting in an embarrassing way. Men are jive, shiftless, and lazy. Women are reduced to hoochie mamas. And there's no real values that are expressed in the films. So as an African-American male, I'm always concerned about how our images are portrayed in the media. And I want to touch on that later on in my discussion. But I'm always one also who critiques film just to see how this powerful medium of communication is able to express ideas and influence minds. So what I'm going to do this evening in discussing this film and presenting an analysis of this film, National Treasure, is to look at it from 8 different perspectives. The first perspective is general audience's response to the film. The second perspective is the Kemetic connection, that is, the ancient Egyptian influences that were expressed in the film. The third perspective is the African-American perspective, what role we played in the film. The fourth is the Carroll connection. Carroll was one of the pivotal characters in the movie. And as I was doing research on this presentation, I found that he was quite a historically profound individual with regards to American history. And I want to share that with you. The fifth perspective is the Greek connection. There's a very definite Greek historical influence in this film. The sixth perspective is decoding elements of the film. And the seventh is the Masonic connection, the history of Masonry, how it was portrayed in this film, and what that foretells for other films and books that are going to be coming out about Masonry in the coming years. And then the eighth perspective is the relevancy of National Treasure for Africans living in America. I believe that you can learn something from practically every film if you know what to look for, if you know how to analyze them. I want you to understand very clearly that there's no such thing as just a movie. Every movie has profound effects, not just economic effects, but mental, social, and spiritual effects. So as people of African ancestry, we've got to begin to exercise a little bit more responsibility with how we spend our money and the films we spend our money on, because we buy more movie tickets than anybody else in this country. And if we decided that we were going to no longer patronize films that portrayed us in an unacceptable manner, we could redirect the course of the movie industry. That is the power that we have. But we have to begin to look at films as more than entertainment and see them as vehicles that can educate and enlighten. So I'm going to do that in my analysis of this film, and I trust that the techniques and the insights that I'll share with you are insights that you all can internalize within yourselves as you view other films. Now, the general overview of the film deals with a family who consider themselves to be treasure protectors. They are the custodians of a legacy that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And the film opens in 1974 with a young boy in his father's attic, and he stumbles upon a book. The father then encounters the young boy and decides that the boy is old enough to be told the story of his heritage. And the story begins with the grandfather pulling out a dollar bill and talking about the Masonic symbols on the dollar bill. And this national treasure that was brought to the United States ages ago for safekeeping. And he goes on and tells the story that this secret information about this treasure has been passed down in the family for 6 generations. And it is their responsibility to safeguard that treasure. And that's what kickstarts the movie, when this young boy begins to fulfill his destiny to find this treasure and to safeguard it from the bad guys. The essence of the story is about a note that was given to his great-great-great-great-grandfather. The note was given to him by Charles Carroll, who was on his deathbed and gave him this clue to this secret, this treasure. And the clue was a note that says, "The secret lies with Charlotte." Grandfather, in talking about this treasure, took the treasure all the way back to Kemet. Can we all see okay? Yeah. Okay. Took the treasure all the way back to ancient Kemet. That was the initial beginning of the treasure. And then the treasure was looted by groups of Nubians in Africa. And then it was looted by the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then it was taken out of Africa into Europe and was passed around from kingdom to kingdom in Europe until it became too unsafe to keep the treasure in Europe, and so it was sent across the waters to the New World for safekeeping. And what was implied in the story was that it was Christopher Columbus himself who was responsible for bringing this treasure to the New World. And they showed Columbus on the deck of the ship holding this medallion that's above the pyramid on the dollar bill. You're going to see that symbol repeated over and over again throughout the film. So it establishes a link between this secret organization of men who happen to be Freemasons and their efforts to hide this treasure, this national treasure, one of the wealthiest treasures ever known to human beings. So it goes from, the story jumps from the initial conversation with his grandfather where he's told about the treasure to 30 years into the present era, where his grandson, Benjamin Franklin Gates, is now obsessed with searching for and finding this treasure. And he has found someone to bankroll his search, his quest for the treasure. And that search has led them to the Arctic Circle, where they found this ship. And inside of the ship, they found a clue which linked them to this treasure. Here we see the great-great-great-great-grandson, Benjamin, and the man, Ian, who financed this expedition. And he finds this pipe, and on this pipe there are symbols. And he records the symbols, and he begins to decipher the message. And upon deciphering the message, he comes to an awareness that the next clue to this treasure is written on the back of the Declaration of Independence. It is an invisible message. And so the suggestion is that they've got to go to the National Archives and steal the Declaration of Independence in order to find out where this treasure is. Now Gates, who is a proud American, resists the idea of breaking into the archives and stealing this very important document. And so he falls out with this financier. This financier says, well, if you're not with me, you're against me. And so he makes a move to kill him.
thinks that he does kill him, blows up the ship, then he makes his way back to Washington, D.C. to implement his plan to steal the Declaration of Independence. In the meantime, Gates and his partner escape. They come back to Washington, D.C. They go to the FBI. They tell the FBI this plan this man has to steal the Declaration of Independence, and of course nobody believes them. And so they decide that they have to steal the Declaration themselves in order to safeguard this national treasure. And one of the pivotal comments in their decision to steal this treasure was a comment that was made by Ben Franklin Gates when he said that when something is wrong, those with the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. Yeah. So in other words, that justified him coming up with a plan to break into the National Archives and steal the Declaration of Independence before the bad guys stole it and did God knows what with it. So in other words, you can justify anything. And patriotism is often the motivation for justifying things that are inhumane and ungodly. So he comes up with this plan to break into the archives. And he does, in fact, steal the Declaration of Independence, and on his way out of the room where it was kept, he encounters the bad guys who are coming in. They shoot at him. He escapes, and then he goes to his father's house, and they find a way to decipher this and to make visible this invisible message on the back of the Declaration of Independence. And that gives them another clue, which sends them on another path, which takes them from D.C. to Philadelphia. Once they get to Philadelphia, they find another clue, and another clue then leads them from Philadelphia to New York. In the meantime, the FBI is chasing after him for stealing the Declaration of Independence. The bad guys after him to get the Declaration of Independence, and the movie moves into full chase mode. And it basically culminates with them finding the treasure. And they found the treasure in the basement of a church in New York City, Trinity Church in New York City. And as they enter the treasure room, they find this, one of the greatest treasures that's ever been accumulated by human beings. They make a decision then to turn the treasure over to the FBI. They strike a deal with the FBI to help them arrest the bad guys so that Ben Gates could exonerate himself and everybody goes free. And in the end, everybody's happy. White boy gets his 1%, which is $100 million, and he and his wife live happily ever after. So that's the story in a nutshell. As I said, it was a feel-good story. It was a movie that that made almost $200 million. The video sales of the film have also done quite well, and so it implies that there's probably going to be a follow-up to this film at some point in time in the future. And since the film did do so well, there will probably be other people who will make similar films about Masonry in the United States. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But I want to look at the comedic connection with the film. Now, I'm someone who likes movies, but I always like to analyze films. I always like to analyze what was the director thinking about? Why is he showing us this scene? Why this angle? Everything that you see in a film is there for a specific reason. Everything that is in the shot, in that frame, has been decided upon by the art director, by the cinematographer. So there are no accidents. I like to look at films because I like to think about the creative writing process, what goes into writing the screenplay, what goes into producing the film, what goes into acting, and putting all of these pieces together to make a film. You watch a film and there may be 15 to 20 characters in the film, but if you ever watch the credits at the end of the film, you'll see 100, 200 names running on the screen. It is those people behind the scenes who make that movie possible. They are more important than the actors that you see on the screen. So when you begin to look at films from that perspective, it gives you an insight as to what goes into the creation of a film. So when you analyze the film, you you can begin to understand that everything that you see on that screen is there for a purpose. Whether you're conscious of that purpose or not, or whether or not that purpose is referenced in the dialogue of the film. So I looked at the comedic connections in the film, and I just want to share some of those points with you. In the beginning of the story, when the grandfather was talking to his grandson about the beginning of the accumulation of this national treasure, the director very strategically did a dissolve from the grandfather to a scene in Egypt. And this dissolve was done in such a fashion that the grandfather's eye was the last image to disappear as the image of Kemet was fading into the screen. And then you notice how the grandfather's eye was strategically placed above the capstone of the unfinished pyramid. Now that was a very skillful artistic move, okay? And it references the role of masonry to this film and this history. The grandfather also referenced this medallion that Christopher Columbus was holding in his hand as he was standing on the bow of the Nina or the Pinta or the Santa Maria, one of those three ships that he used when he was lost. And as I looked at that medallion, I said, you know, that object looks familiar. I've seen that image before. So I went through some of my reference books that I have in my library, and I found the inspiration for that medallion. That medallion is similar to the medallion that was struck in 1818 in London, England, to celebrate the Italian thief by the name of Belzoni, who was responsible for stealing more artifacts out of Kemet than any other European thief. He's the man who discovered the Temple of Abu-Simbel. He's responsible for bringing Tekhenu, portions of temple, complete walls out of temples and tombs. He described how in one event when he was searching for a tomb, he stumbled in the dark inside of this tomb, and he must have crushed at least 40 or 50 mummies as he was trying to get his bearing. And the air from, and the dust of these mummies filled the air, and he almost suffocated. He brought dozens of mummies back to England, to France, to Germany. And this medallion was struck to commemorate specific artifacts that he was bringing to Egypt for a special exhibition. So it tells me that the writers of this film did their homework. And they were looking at this history of stealing national treasures. And they found a very convenient way to incorporate a symbol of that history into the film. Another significant aspect of the film had to do with when they were in the treasure room. And the wall outside of the treasure room was a wall that had an eye painted on the wall. And it was that wall that led him to another room that ultimately led him inside of the treasure room. And this with this pipe. And right next to the lock, there's an ark on the wall. So as they're getting two statues of Sekhmet and a couple of other Kemetic statues, all in the foreground. So the first part of this treasure room was all Kemetic artifacts. This invasion of Kemet in the late 18th century was that Napoleon brought with him a team of scholars, savants is what they were called in French. They were artists, they were scientists, they were engineers, they were architects, and it was their role to document everything that they saw, everything that they discovered in Egypt. And it was this compilation of data that led to the formal formulation of the field of Egyptology. And over the course of the next decade or so, the drawings and their research were published in a series of books entitled The Descriptions of Egypt. And this illustration here is the frontispiece of that publication. And if you look at this image, then essentially what you see is a scene of Kemet in the north, in Alexandria. This is the pillar that was placed here by the Greeks in Alexandria. And here you see the Mediterranean Sea. And in the foreground, you see all of the artifacts that were stolen by Napoleon's troops when they were in Kemet, during the 2.5 years that they were in Kemet. You see the Zodiac of Dendera here. You see a Tekken. You see a ram-headed sphinx. You see a statue of a star. You see pieces of temples that were shipped back to France and now occupy some of the prime space within the Louvre Museum. But if you observe this view, then what you notice is that you're in the northern part of Kemet looking up south, up the Nile. You can see the temples at Luxor and Karnak. You can see the temples of Dendera. You can see other temples moving further and further up the Nile. So this is a view for the northern part of Kemet looking up south with all of the artifacts that they've stolen. This is the same view that you see here in the temple room. Kemet is at in the foreground of the scene. And as you look back, you see all the other places where this treasure had been taken. And everywhere this treasure was taken, it led to the development of that nation. And we're going to come to find out that the treasure is more than just treasure. It's more than just gold and diamonds and precious jewels. The other point I want to look at is the African-American connection. I'm always interested to see the roles that we play in films because, like you, I'm tired of seeing us shucking and jiving. I'm tired of seeing us there just for the benefit of white folk. And I must say, this film was pretty much the same old thing. There were only 3 African characters in the film. And each of those characters had a pivotal role to play in helping who was the cashier inside of the archives building. And she was the one who thought that Nicolas Cage's character was trying to steal the Declaration of Independence. And so she confronted him and they had a little exchange. Her role was pivotal to setting certain things in motion in the film. The next African character we see is when they're in Philadelphia. This young child is sent inside of the Franklin Institute to decipher another piece of the puzzle that they were given. They didn't want to go inside because they knew the bad guys were looking for them. So they send this young African-American child in to decipher the message and then to come out and give them the uncoded message. The young boy comes out, finds that the guy's gone, the white guy's gone. But then there's another white guy, the bad guy, sees this young child looking at this document, and he appears to be counting something. So he approaches the young boy and he asks him what he's doing, and then he finds out that he knows the clue to this puzzle. Gives him a $100 bill, pays him off, and the young boy gives him this clue which helps him track down the good guys. And then another scene in the film takes place in Philadelphia where this sister with serious attitude comes to the aid of the white female star in the film as she's being chased by the bad guys. So in these 3 instances, you see that each African-American character plays a role which helps the white characters fulfill their mission. So we're there just to aid them, as usual. As usual. Okay? Let's look at another interesting part of the film. Now this is where I began to realize that there was more to the film than what was presented on the screen. When they're inside of that ship in the Arctic Circle, and Nicolas Cage's character decodes this statement, which he writes in his journal. And the statement is, the legend writ, the stain affected, the key in silence undetected, 55 an iron pen, Mr. Matlock can't offend. Now, the scene was a pretty good scene in terms of him doing, playing the role of Sherlock Holmes and trying to decipher this message. And it's this message that leads him to conclude that 55 with iron pen references a document that was written, a document that was not written in iron, but a document that was firm, that was resolved. And through his extrapolation, he concluded that it was the Declaration of Independence, which he said was written by Timothy Matlock. And so the legend written, the stained affected implied that there was something written on that document which would become apparent when this stain or this invisible ink is manipulated in such a way that it reveals the information. And that's what led him to conclude that this clue is on the back of the Declaration of Independence. Now, this is the thing that gets the movie going. And as I was going over the scene in my head, doing some research on the Declaration of Independence, it dawned on me that, wait a minute, the Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 men, not 55. And that the person responsible for writing the Declaration of Independence, the final copy of the Declaration of Independence, which was signed by these 55 men, his name was Thomas Matlock, not Timothy Matlock. And so I had to question why the writers of this film would intentionally make this error. And the only conclusion that I could come to was that it was an intentional error in order to raise a flag so that those who knew a little something about U.S. history would begin to analyze what this really meant. So I followed that lead. And when I went down to the archives, National Archives in D.C., and I picked up a copy, a publication on the Declaration of Independence, did some research and found some very interesting things that I want to share with you. They said the Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 men, not 55. And in this publication on the Declaration of Independence, there was this page which basically laid out who's who in the Declaration of Independence. And it listed all 56 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. It listed their name, their date of birth, their place of birth, their age in 1776 when this declaration was signed. It listed their occupation and their date of death. So sure enough, Charles Carroll did die in 1832, as stated in the film. He was the last of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence to die. That's a fact. But as I began to look at this list of names, I saw that this term merchant was applied to several of these men. And in this publication, it mentioned that the merchants were typically the wealthy American colonists who owned ships. And those ships that were involved in the slave trade. It also made reference to those plantation owners. And the plantation owners, we know, were slaves, enslavers. So I went through and compiled a more detailed list of who these 56 men were. And I deduced from that of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 14 of them owned plantations or were enslavers. 12 of them were New England merchants who owned slave ships. 9 of these men were known Masons, and 41 of them were known to have affiliations with Masonic institutions. So essentially what that means is that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declarations of Independence were Masons. 14 of those men owned enslaved Africans from the outset. And at least 12 of them ran a fleet of slave ships which brought Africans from the continent or from the islands in the Caribbean to the Americas. So it establishes a very firm link between slave trade and masonry. Now, also in this book, it made reference to the fact that when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, it says here that 2 sections were removed from the original draft the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. One of the segments that was removed was a segment that referenced the people of Great Britain. They took umbrage against the King of Great Britain, King George III, and the people of Great Britain. And as these men were debating this issue, they said, well, look, we don't have a beef against the people of Great Britain, just the people who run, just the king, the people who run the nation. So let's omit that reference to the people because we don't want to offend folk who may want to come to our aid. And then the other portion that they omitted from the first draft of the Declaration of Independence was a passage about the slave trade, in which Jefferson and the other members of the committee condemned slavery as cruel and inhuman, even though they enslaved Africans. But they were at least acknowledging that it was wrong, and we should do something about it. Well, the other men in that Declaration Committee said, no, you got to take that out, because we make our money from selling these Africans. And we don't want to be condemned. We don't want to be looked at in a negative light. And it's stated right here that the passage regarding slavery was removed because it offended some members of Congress, especially Southern planters and wealthy merchants from New England who owned ships used in the slave trade. So in other words, they were acting in their best interest. It had nothing to do with freedom, justice, and equality for all people. It was freedom, justice, and equality for white people. And they were very clear about that. Those liberties did not extend to us, our children, or anyone else who happened to be darker than them. And so, let's move on and look at the Carroll connection. Because Charles Carroll is a very significant personality with regards to the Declaration of Independence and the colonies. This is research on the Carroll family. Carroll is the one who basically got the movie started with the note, "The secret lies with Charlotte." He gave it to his young coach driver before he died. The Carroll family is one of three prominent American leaders, two brothers, Daniel and John, and their cousin, Charles. There's research on the Carroll family. Daniel Carroll lived from 1730 to 1796. He was born in Prince George's County, Maryland. He was one of the three commissioners of the new capital city, appointed by George Washington to oversee the work of Benjamin Banneker and Andrew Ellicott in surveying and designing this 10-mile square that will become Washington, D.C. He signed both the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution. John Carroll was born in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. He was the first Roman Catholic bishop, and he went on to found the university that is now known as Georgetown. And then we come to their cousin, Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll lived from 1737 till 1832. He was born in Annapolis, Maryland. He was the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence. And he was the wealthiest capitalist in the colonies. The wealthiest capitalist in the colonies. He helped finance the Revolutionary War. He helped pay the bills for the events that led to the writing of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He bankrolled this nation as they were first starting out. He was a slave owner. He owned slave ships. So he made his fortune on the backs of African men, women, and children. Have you all ever heard of New Carrollton in Maryland? Yeah. There's a stop on the metro called New Carrollton. He owned all of that land. To distinguish himself from his cousins, he signed all of his letters, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. So that was all where New Carrollton is now, was his plantation. And God knows how many Africans lived and died on that property.
There's one right here in Baltimore called Carroll Park.
Carroll Park? Okay.
That's burned, and the other one is right down Baltimore.
Well, they got influence. They got power. When you have money, when you have power, people name cities, counties, parks, buildings after you. So these were plantations. Well, what I'm saying is, it's the same family. More than likely, it's probably the same family. Now, as I was looking at the Carroll family, trying to understand something about this man, Charles Carroll, one of the wealthiest men, made his fortune like the other founding fathers of America made their fortune off of their African property. So the movie opens with Carroll being driven in a dark, rainy night to the White House to meet with Andrew Jackson, who wasn't in. And the coach driver was Thomas Gates. Now, when I realized that Carroll was a slave owner, I said, now that doesn't sound right. Why would a white man be driving his coach in the middle of the night? That was a job that was reserved for us. So when I began to think about that from that perspective, it made me wonder who, in fact, Thomas Gates really was. Or who his persona was implied to be in the film. Here's a little, in the Washington Post every Sunday, they've got this cartoon strip called Flashbacks. And Flashbacks does a history of Washington, D.C. on the inauguration of President George Washington. And he had a written color man, a Negro. Here's another character in the background of another wealthy white man coming to this event who's a carriage driver, a black man. You can see that he's colored dark. So then it makes no sense for Thomas Carroll to have a white guy driving his carriage in the middle of the night. So if Thomas Carroll was anything like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, then he probably produced children from some of his female enslaved Africans. And those children, like Sally Hemings' children, headed a little bit better off than the rest of the enslaved Africans. So I wonder, what if Thomas Gates was a mulatto? What if he was a mulatto? And if he was, then that would mean that the Gates family is a family of mulattoes who may be passing. They may not even know that they're passing. Maybe that explains why they all were ostracized, why they all were the black sheep of the white family. Now, this is interesting because when you look at the relationships between whites and Africans at this point in time in history, you'll find some very interesting pairings that weren't necessarily talked about in American history. Anybody know who this woman is?
It's Eisenhower's mother.
Nope, that's not Eisenhower's mother.
Okay.
Pardon me? One of the queens of England? Yes. This woman is known as Queen Charlotte Sophia of Mecklenburg, of Germany. She was the wife of King George III, the King of England during the time of the American Revolution. Now, did you ever learn that in American history? That the queen of the King of England was a black woman. Charlotte Sophia of Mecklenburg, Germany. Now, what's interesting about Charlotte Sophia is that this sister, when King George III was literally insane, was clinically insane. He was out of his mind. No question about it. There's an interesting film about him called The Madness of King George. He has some genetic defect that caused him to literally be insane. And so Queen Charlotte Sophia basically ran things. She was a strong black woman, and she ran things, produced, I forget how many children. She had a slew of kids by him. And what was interesting, I heard a sister this past March talking about women's history. She made reference to Charlotte Sophia. She said that Charlotte Sophia proposed to her husband, King George III of England, to ban slavery in Great Britain and in all of the British colonies. Now, with that little historical footnote, if the King of England said that he was abolishing slavery in the colonies, would that not be a reason for George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and all of those good slave owners to rise up and rebel against the king who was going to take away their income? Could that be the real reason for the American Revolution? But you won't find that in the typical American history class, but it's an issue that needs to be examined. And based on this evidence, there's probably a lot to justify this theory. So let me move to the Greek connection. I'm going to come back to Charlotte Mecklenburg later on in the presentation, so I want you to make a mental note of this sister and the role that she played in U.S. history. I want to look at the Greek connection for a minute. Last year, there was a film out called Troy. There were two films about Greece, Troy and Alexander. Both of these films were neither one of these films did as well as National Treasure. They were historical films in which Europeans exposed their greed, their violence, their lust, their homosexuality, all of the issues that supposedly made them civilized people. I saw both of these films because, I believe in checking out everybody's history. As John Henry Clark said a long time ago, if you want to know your oppressor, study his history. Study his history in Europe and his history in America. And you'll have a better idea of the things and conditions that motivates him to act the way he acts. So I looked at the movie Troy and noticed that there were characters in the movie Troy who also starred in the movie National Treasure. The woman who played Helen, the reason for the Trojan War, was Diane Kruger, who played Dr. Chase, the female lead in National Treasure, the woman who worked at the archives. The person who played Odysseus, or Ulysses, in Troy, was Sean Bean, the actor who played Ian, the bad guy, who financed Nicolas Cage. So I thought it was kind of coincidental that both of these actors who starred in a Greek production were now starring in this film. And I would have dismissed it until I was looking at the video of National Treasure, and I noticed that the getaway vehicle that the bad guy was driving, Ian Bean, his character, was driving this getaway van when they attempted to rob the archives. I noticed that the sign on the truck that they were driving was Olympus Greek Foods. So somebody was making a connection. Somebody was trying to tell us something. There was another film that came out last year, Alexander, which didn't do very well. But one of the historical facts that was presented in that film showed Alexander as a young child and his tutor Aristotle teaching him history, giving him his values that would stay with him for the rest of Alexander's short life. The actor who played Alexander was Christopher Plummer, the same actor who played Nick. So there's another connection to Greece. And if you think about that scene when they first entered the treasure room, they saw the treasure, and the white woman, this woman, goes over to some artifacts in the treasure room. And the very first item she references are papyrus scrolls from the library at Alexandria. Those papyrus scrolls were stolen from the temples in ancient Kemet. If you're familiar with George Neal James's book, Stolen Legacy, he documents the Greeks' invasion of Kemet 332 BCE, led by Alexander of Macedonia. I don't call him Alexander the Great because I think greatness has to be earned. And that when his troops conquered Kemet, they closed many of the temples that were the universities of knowledge in ancient Kemet. Temples that had thrived for 2,000 to 3,000 years. Every temple had a library, and each library contained thousands and thousands of books or papyrus scrolls. Information about science, astronomy, law, physics, mathematics, algebra, trigonometry, geometry, theology, architecture, engineering, philosophy, medicine. All of this information was contained in these libraries. Alexander had access to all of this information, which was looted from these libraries. It was taken back to the northernmost part of Kemet, to a city that was renamed after Alexander, after his death, Alexandria. And it was there where one of his generals, Ptolemy, took control over Egypt and established the university and the library of Alexandria in honor of his fallen comrades. It was then that they opened the doors to his homeboys in Greece to come to the Nile Valley and study 4,000 years of history. So those Greeks who wanted to be philosophers came to Kemet, studied 4,000 years of philosophy, returned to Greece, and declared themselves to be the father of philosophy. Euclid studied mathematics in Kemet, returned to Greece, and declared himself to be the father of geometry. The father of geometry. How the heck can he be the father of geometry when geometry was used to build the pyramids at least 2,500 years before Euclid was born? But if you don't know our story, then you continue to give Greeks and freaks and other people credit that they don't deserve. Now, let's decode other aspects of this film. As I was analyzing this film, I came to realize that the national treasure is not about precious minerals mined from the earth, gold, diamond, silver, platinum. It's really about precious memories that are unearthed in the mind. This is the national treasure right here. And if you remember the scene right outside the treasure room where Nicolas Cage's character thought that the treasure room was empty and that someone had beat them to it and he was about to give up. He was depressed. That was a moment where he reconciled with his father, John Boyce's character. They had been at odds throughout the entire film. And the father said, "No, son, I'm proud of you because you had a vision and you stuck to that vision. I'm proud of you. Your grandfather is proud of you. All of your ancestors are proud of you because you stuck to the mission. You didn't give up." And so the essence of that reconciliation was about honoring the memory of your ancestors. It ain't about the money. It ain't about the bling. It's about that knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation, the knowledge that gives you your real foundation, the foundation upon which you can build a nation and do the things that you were supposed to do. So if we look at the essence of national treasure and decoding the messages and the symbols in national treasure, you find that they have plenty of messages that we can internalize and use to empower ourselves. For example, when Cage's character goes to Washington, D.C., to go into the archives to do his research before he comes up with this plan to steal this document, he does his research. Before you do anything, you have to do your research. And you see him walking into the south side of the National Archives. The southern entrance is the entrance that researchers use to access the building. Visitors, tourists come in on the north side, on the Constitution Avenue side. He entered on the Pennsylvania Avenue side. And as you enter that building, from the Pennsylvania Avenue side, you have to walk past two statues. There's a statue to the left of the entrance, which is of a woman. And she's holding an open book in her hand. Beneath this woman is an inscription carved in stone which says, "Past is prologue." On the other side of that doorway, on the west side of that building, is a statue of a man sitting in a chair holding a book. And the words beneath him read, "Study the past." If the past is prologue, If the past gives you an indication of what is going to happen, then it is through your study of the past that you know what time it is. Dr. Clark said history is the clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. The past is prologue. By studying the past, you understand how you got where you are, but more importantly, you understand where it is you can go. And knowledge is the pathway to the future. So the first thing he did was did his research. And then they went to the Library of Congress to pull down all the information, all the plans, the engineering specs, the design plans on the archives, so that they can figure out a way to steal that document. It all begins with research. What's interesting, this movie generated so much interest and so much patriotism that the National Archives last December, sponsored the National Treasures Family Weekend. Now, even though this movie was a work of fiction, the National Archives found a way to capitalize the aspect of this film. Here's a map of Wall Street. This spot here is Trinity Church. That whole area of Wall Street is of profound significance to people of African ancestry. Right at the center section right here, you see the sign that indicates Wall Street and Broadway, which is right where Trinity Church is. Right down the street from the church is a plaque which makes reference to the wall that extended from the East River to the Hudson River, a wall that was built, and the wall that lent its name to the street, Wall Street. And this plaque makes reference to the fact that the wall was built by the Dutch in order to provide protection from folk who may try to invade the city. What they didn't reference on that plaque is that one of the reasons why the wall was built and why the wall was later utilized in American history was that slave ships docked all in this area. And we know today that Wall Street is the financial heart of this nation. And that it's not too far from this scene was Ground Zero, where the two towers were, over here. Okay? And so the real history behind Wall Street is that the street gets its name because when the slave ships docked here, Africans were kept in pens in this area. And they were sold on auction blocks right around here in this area. Slave ships docked, and the first thing the captains did was to go to the agents of the ship owners to get paid for delivering their cargo. Or if Africans died, they had to go to the agent's insurance company in order to file a claim so that they could be compensated for their dead cargo. This is why this became the financial district of the United States, because this is where all of the business transactions relative to the slave trade took place. And so you had insurance companies, you had banks, you had investors and other businessmen who set up shop right in this area. And these businessmen began complaining about the sight of these dirty, nasty, ugly Africans coming off of this ship after 3 months on the Middle Passage. They began complaining about the odor, the stench from these Africans. And so to placate these wealthy financiers who were bringing money to this area, they built a wall so that they couldn't see what was happening on the other side to the Africans. That's where Wall Street really gets its name. But most folks don't know that aspect of American history. And even when you look at this historical plaque, this plaque suffers from historical amnesia because they don't tell you the real story behind the name Wall Street. That's why we've got to do our own research. We've got to dig deep to get to the heart of the matter. Here is Trinity Church, which is located in this spot right here, on Broadway, right at the beginning of Wall Street. Right around the corner from Trinity Church, right here, is Federal Hall. Federal Hall was the site of the first presidential inauguration. where Georgia met in their official capacity. New York was the first capital of this nation. And right across the street from Federal Hall, there's this statue of George Washington right in the front of Federal Hall. And right across the street from Federal Hall, right here, is the New York Stock Exchange. So you see, all of this stuff is tied together. The financial foundation of this nation is rooted in slavery. And if you go right down the street from Federal Hall and the New York Stock Exchange, Customs House. And when I was going to New York, for a speaking engagement, called Brother James Small to tell him I was coming up to New York, and I wanted to go down to Wall Street just to walk around, just to get a feel for what was there, do some research for this presentation that I was going to do on the film National Treasure. So he agreed to meet up with me down there, because he said, there's a building down there that I want you to see. It's got some interesting statues on the building. I don't know what they are, but I think you can probably decipher them. So we hooked up, and we went down to this building. And I want to just show you one other image. This scene here is a scene that was on some literature that I picked up at Trinity Church about the history of Wall Street. And what you notice in this scene is Federal Hall in the background. The New York Stock Exchange is over here. And you see groups of enslaved Africans laying down the sewer system. The main customs house for all ships that came into the United States. This building was built in the late 19th century. Replaced an older building. It was in this building where artifacts of Native American history were kept by, I forget the name of the European, who had one of the largest collections of Native American artifacts. And he donated his collection to the Smithsonian. And it was his collection which served as the foundation for the Museum of the Native American that just opened up on the mall a year ago, last September. So they have been preserving our history. This building has within it, or on the exterior of the building, a very interesting history. There's a series of statues, 4 statues on the exterior of the building. 3 of those statues are of primary importance to us. They're all statues of females. Females in this instance represent the nation. And specifically, we see a reference to an African woman. It's a sister here. Her statue is on the far right of this building. It is a sister. We see her long braids, she's bare-chested, and she's asleep, sitting in a chair. That chair represents the land that she represents. And on one side of the chair, we see a lion sitting beside her. On the other side of the chair, we see Haramaki, so-called Sphinx. So this is Africa. This is Kemet. Now, if you walk to the side of that statue, you'll see something very interesting. You'll see a man cloaked in a garment, hiding behind this woman. And he has just taken a book which he has covered up. A book is symbolic of knowledge. The reason why this woman is asleep is because, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, sleep represents someone who is dead, who is no longer alive, who is no longer functioning in the world of consciousness. So Africa is dead, and someone has stolen the treasures of Africa. Someone has stolen the knowledge of Africa. Who's stolen it? Well, they show you. Right next to that statue is a statue of a woman. She can be either Greek or Roman because they have the same mythology. This woman represents Athena or Minerva, the Greek goddess of wisdom or the Roman goddess of wisdom. She is wearing the breastplate of Minerva, so you know who she is. It represents Europe. It represents Southern Europe. She has the book right at her hand, and it's open, which means that she is now benefiting from this knowledge. On the side of her statue, you see that same man here, partially unclothed, holding a globe in his hand with a laurel leaf. A laurel leaf is a symbol of victory. So it means that the Europeans, with this stolen knowledge, are now victorious in their effort to conquer the world. The next image represents America. Female figure symbolizing America. We see here a man at her side, and you see her hand pulling off the covers. It's the same man you saw in Europe, the same man who was in Africa. He's now fully exposed, ready to be unleashed on the world. She doesn't have a book. She doesn't need a book. She's got a torch. And the torch represents light, which is symbolic of knowledge, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So America has been the recipient of this knowledge, which came out of Africa, went into southern Europe through Greece, then through Rome, then made its way across the Atlantic Ocean, and is now harbored, safely harbored here in America. That is the national treasure. It's knowledge, not jewels, not bling, it's information. Whoever is in possession of the knowledge controls the world. So I saw these images. On this building, and they reminded me of images that I had seen in Washington, D.C. For those of you all who come on the field trip either next Sunday or 2 Sundays after that, you'll get a chance to see this for yourself. I don't want to go into the whole thing. And here is the last image I want to show you is the man on the side of America, and the cloak is completely removed from him. So he's now been unleashed to do his thing throughout the world. So symbolically, what we're seeing is a representation of America, which is the recipient of ancient knowledge and ancient wisdom, which accounts for it being the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history. This is how that legacy came about. So if you come to Washington, D.C., to the Library of Congress, the Library of Congress is significant because it's the oldest cultural institution in Washington, D.C. The Library of Congress was built in 1898. And one of the most significant aspects of the Library of Congress are the heads that surround this building. There's a total of 33 heads that surround that building. 33 heads relate to the 33 degrees of masonry. These 33 heads are the ethnological heads that represent the 33 so-called races that inhabit planet Earth. But in my latest book, Egypt on the Potomac, or in the field trip, I'm going to explain to you what these heads truly represent. And then in 1898, Europeans knew who we were, and they knew who they were. And they have hidden in plain sight this knowledge. On the exterior of the greatest repository of culture and knowledge in the history of the world, the Library of Congress receives, there's 3 buildings of the Library of Congress, all named after dead white men. Thomas Jefferson Building, the John Adams Building, the James Madison Building. These 3 buildings contain over 125 million artifacts. These 3 buildings receive 22,000 items every week. It is the greatest collection of knowledge in the history of human consciousness. And on the exterior of this building, they have symbols to tell the world who we are and who they are. And it's all depicted in plain sight with these 33 heads. And the essence of it is, they acknowledged when this building was built that Africans were the original man. They acknowledge that Europeans are 3/5 of a man, contrary to what the U.S. Constitution said, Article 162, Clause 3. They knew that information, and it's hidden in plain sight, right there in front of your face, so that you can never accuse them of keeping this information away from you. It's right there in the greatest library the world has ever known. But if you don't like to read, they never have to worry about you finding out their secret. And the reason why you don't like to read was because for 13 generations they made it illegal for you to know how to read. Punishable by death, punishable by your eyes being gouged out, punishable by your hands or fingers being cut off if they caught you writing. So they make sure that the descendants of these enslaved Africans, once they were free, would run from books like Superman runs from kryptonite. And that's a situation that we can change if we have the consciousness and the motivation to change. Because the bottom line is, it's all about knowledge. It's all about what you know. Now let's look at the Masonic connection for a few minutes. Because as I said, there are 33 heads that surround the Thomas Jefferson Building in the Library of Congress, and they relate to the 33 degrees of Masonry. That information tells a very simple and basic story. But let's look at the Masonic connection. In that scene, the first scene where we see a person of color in the film The National Treasure took place within the inside of the archives. And there's a sister there who's a cashier. And understanding that everything that you said in the Navy, so when they went in, I went down to the archives, and they were hidden stuff together. This night, I asked, it just so happened that it's a superior, the greatest auditory of in the history they had in the Congress received for 3 buildings architecture of our nation's capital. I said no to the film intended